last witness, John Barsad, 7 or 8 years. But that was merely a coincidence. He didn't call it a particularly curious coincidence. Most coincidences were curious. Neither did he call it a curious coincidence that true patriotism was his only motive, too. He was a true Briton and hoped there were many like him. So no, I'm not getting paid for this testimony either. The blue flies buzzed again, and Mr. Attorney General called Mr. Jarvis Lorry. Mr. Jarvis Lorry, are you clerk in Tellson's bank? I am. On a certain Friday night in November 1775, did business occasion you to travel between London and Dover by mail? Yes, it did. Were there any other passengers in the mail? 2. Did they alight on the road in the course of the night? Yes, when we were going up Shooter's Hill. We had to get out of the carriage, right? They did. Mr. Lorry, look upon the prisoner. Was he one of those 2 passengers? I cannot undertake to say that he was. Do you remember how dark and misty and foggy and scared they were and everything? They were completely wrapped up and completely distant from each other because nobody trusted anyone else, but they were wrapped up from the cold and the mist and all of that as well. So he says, I cannot say that he was one of them. Does he resemble either of these 2 passengers? Both were so wrapped up and the night was so dark and we were all so reserved that I cannot undertake to say even that. Mr. Lorry, look again upon the prisoner. Supposing him wrapped up as those 2 passengers were, is there anything in his bulk and stature to render it unlikely that he was one of them? No. You will not swear, Mr. Lorry, that he was not one of them? No. So at least you say he may have been one of them. Yes, except that I remember them both to have been, like myself, timorous of highwaymen, like nervous about highwaymen. And the prisoner has not a timorous air. Did you ever see a counterfeit of timidity, Mr. Lorry? I certainly have seen that. Mr. Lorry, look once more upon the prisoner. Have you seen him, to your certain knowledge, before? I have. When? I was returning from France a few days afterward, and at Calais, the prisoner came on board the packet ship in which I had returned, and made the voyage with me. At what hour did he come on board? A little after midnight, in the dead of the night. Was he the only passenger who came on board at that untimely hour? Should he be saying these things? The Attorney General, the prosecutor, in the dead of the night, that untimely hour. It's kind of editorializing. He's adding some opinion words in there that maybe shouldn't be in there. He happened to be the only one. Never mind about happening, Mr. Lorry. He was the only passenger who came on board in the dead of the night? He was. Were you traveling alone, Mr. Lorry, or with any companion? With 2 companions, a gentleman and a lady. They are here. They are here. Had you any conversation with the prisoner? Hardly any. The weather was stormy and the passage long and rough, and I lay on a sofa almost from shore to shore. Miss Manette, the young lady, to whom all eyes had been turned before and were now turned again, stood up where she sat. Her father rose with her and kept her hand drawn through his arm. Miss Manette, look upon the prisoner. To be confronted with such pity and such earnest youth and beauty was far more trying to the accused than to be confronted with all the crowd, standing as it were apart with her on the edge of his grave. Not all the staring curiosity that looked on could, for the moment, nerve him to remain quite still. His hurried right hand parceled out the herbs before him into imaginary beds of flowers in a garden, and his efforts to control and steady his breathing shook the lips from which the color rushed to his heart. The buzz of the great flies was loud again. Miss Manette, have you seen this prisoner? Before? Yes, sir. Where? On board of the packet ship just now referred to, sir, on the same occasion. You are the young lady now referred to? Oh, most unhappily I am. The plaintive tone of her compassion merged into the less musical voice of the judge as he said something fiercely. Answer the questions put to you and make no remark upon them. So she said unhappily, and the judge, not even the Attorney General, the judge said, Don't editorialize. Don't add words like unhappily. Miss Minette, had you any conversation with the prisoner upon that passage across the channel? Yes, sir. Recall it. In the midst of a profound stillness, she faintly began. When the gentleman came on board. Do you mean the prisoner? Inquired the judge, knitting his brows. Yes, my lord. Then say the prisoner. When the prisoner came on board, he noticed that my father, turning her eyes lovingly to him as he stood beside her, was much fatigued and in a very weak state of health. My father was so reduced that I was afraid to take him out of the air, and I had made a bed for him on the deck near the cabin steps, and I sat on the deck at his side to take care of him. There were no other passengers that night but we four. The prisoner was so good as to beg permission to advise me how I should shelter my father from the wind and weather better than I had done. I did not know how to do it well, not understanding how the wind would set when we were out of the harbor. He did it for me. He expressed great gentleness and kindness for my father's state, and I'm sure he felt it. That was the manner of our beginning to speak together. Let me interrupt you for a moment. Had he come on board alone? No. How many were with him? 2 French gentlemen. Had they conferred together? They had conferred together until the last moment, when it was necessary for the French gentlemen to be landed in their boat. Had any papers been handed about among them, similar to these lists? Some papers had been handed about among them, but I don't know what papers. Like these in shape and size? Possibly. But indeed I don't know, although they stood whispering very near to me, because they stood at the top of the cabin steps to have the light of the lamp that was hanging there. It was a dull lamp, and they spoke very low, and I did not hear what they said, and saw only that they looked at papers. Now to the prisoner's conversation, Miss Minette. The prisoner was as open in his confidence with me, which arose out of my helpless situation.